This episode is sponsored by Transcend, a veteran-owned and operated performance optimization company that I introduced recently as a sponsor on this show. Well, since then, I have actually been using my products and I've had incredible success. There was initial blood work that was extremely detailed, and based on that, they offered supplementation. So I began taking DHEA, BPC 157 for inflammation, based on the fact that I've been a stuntman, a martial artist, and a firefighter my whole life. Lots of aches and pains. Dihexa to help cognition after multiple punches to the head and shift work, and peptides. 4 months later, they did a detailed blood work again, and I was actually able to taper off 2 of the peptides because my body had responded so well to just one of them that it was optimized at that point. So I cannot speak highly enough of the immense range of supplementation that they offer, whether it's male health, female health, peptides to boost your own testosterone, which I would argue is needed by a lot of the fire service, or whether it's exogenous testosterone needed, especially after TBIs or advanced age. Now, as I mentioned before, the other side of this company is an altruistic arm called the Transcend Foundation, which is putting veterans and first responders through some of their protocols free of charge. Now, Transcend are also offering you, the audience, 10% off their protocols. And you can find that on jamesgearing.com under the Products tab. And if you want to hear more about Transcend and their story, listen to episode 808 with the founder, Ernie Colling. Or go to transcendcompany.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show expert horseman, team roper, 10 times NFR qualifier, and the founder of the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation, Charly Crawford. So in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his own childhood surrounded by horsemanship, his introduction to the world of roping, catharsis through equine therapy, avoiding identity crisis as an athlete, his own call to service, helping first responders and military members, the powerful and unique fundraiser they have next month, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Charly Crawford. Enjoy. Well, Charly, I want to start by saying 2 things. Firstly, thank you to our mutual friend, Greg Coker, for making this introduction. And secondly, I want to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
I appreciate the opportunity, James.
So for those listening, they don't realize that the last 30 minutes we've been mitigating gremlins in the works of technologies. So we're finally getting this to work now. Very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
I'm in Stephenville, Texas. I'm at home.
Brilliant. Well, I would love to start at the very beginning of your timeline. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
So I'm from a little town called Canby, Oregon, up in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest. That's where I was originally from. My dad roped. I loved roping. My dad was a former Marine. I believe he served 4 or 5 years, I believe, in the Marines. And he loved roping. You know, that was one of the things that I grew up seeing a lot. My dad roped. He was a huge fan of roping. And where we lived was not too far from a very historic little town called St. Paul, Oregon, which is not a very big town, but the rodeo is huge. And so all the top guys in the world would all come to that rodeo. And so when that rodeo would come to town, my dad had an arena and we roped a little bit. And then my mom would film, or my stepmom would film all the ropers at the rodeo. So back in the 80s, 90s, like that was before camera phones. They would all come and hang out because you come rope at our place. They could keep their horses there. And then my stepmom would cook dinner and they could all go watch their runs. So back then, like to be able to watch your run on camera was so rare, not like it is now. And I just fell in love with those guys. They were just so free, talking about going here, going there, flying, jumping on rent-a-cars, getting on other guys' horses and just seeing the world. And that's probably what ruined me to want to be a cowboy, because it was so romantic just to hear them talk and just the freedom that they had. And, everyone that I lived around was talking about a 9-to-5 job that they hated. And those guys loved what they did. And so I was like, man, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And, I prided myself in telling myself when I was in high school and younger that I was going to rope my way out of Canby, Oregon. And I did. I roped good enough that I got a college scholarship to get out of there. Then once I got out of there, then I had opportunities after that. Then I come down here to Texas, and then I was able to get around the best guys in the world. And then, long story short, 10 years later, after I got out of high school, I finally started making the NFR, which is our Super Bowl of rodeo. And I was blessed enough to make that 10 times, not consistently, but I made 10 NFRs. And that's a pretty good stat. It's nothing. I was never the greatest, but I was pretty good at what I did. And that was just something that I couldn't believe I even made it that many times. So it's been a blessing to have that run that I had, and it was great, man. Because when I first got out there, it was as good as I thought it was. It was, you're going so many different places. I've roped in Mexico. I've roped in Canada, and basically every state across the western side of the United States and most of the southern states. And so I got to see a lot of places because of rodeo.
You mentioned your dad was in the Marines. Kind of what was the era? Did he see combat, or was it one of the rare peace times that we've had in our history?
So I don't really know. I believe I got to know, I still got some of his trophies here on the wall. He was a boxer. They said he was 60-0 in the boxing when he was in the Marines. So he was good. My stepmom, I got to go do a clinic up there in Oregon this summer, and I got to actually talk to her, and I wanted to know more about, he had passed in 2020. So I didn't get a chance to really talk to him about a lot of this stuff. He never really talked about it growing up. I just remember hearing little things like Okinawa and some of the places he had been, I think Camp Pendleton, stuff like that. But at such a young age, I wasn't really paying attention. But she had told me he served, I think, in the late 50s and early 60s, between the 4 to 5 years in that time zone. I guess he started, he'd broken his nose boxing, I guess, enough times, and he started bleeding a lot. And he's like, man, I think I'd like to stop boxing. And I said, well, when you do, you're going to be headed back out there across the water. And I guess he didn't believe him, so he quit boxing. And sure enough, he next little bit, he ended up being in Okinawa and all the places I'd heard him just talk just very little about. But he loved it. He loved it. He talked about how much he loved the structure. He loved the structure of it because he didn't really have that growing up. I believe the story from my grandpa that I never met, his dad, was, I believe he served, he fought in the Korean War in the Army. And I don't think it was very romantic. I think he had two choices. He could either go fight in the war or he go to jail. So I think that was kind of how that started. But my dad just loved the structure of it. And that's what was odd was that was kind of probably our roughest time together, because that's how he also parented. It was a dictatorship, and he was a general, and you put your toothpaste here, you put your toothbrush there, so everything was very structured, but like it was, there was no talking back, I think the structure he got in the Marines is exactly how he parented. So when I'm able to be around a lot of these guys, it's familiar, if that makes sense. Like when I'm around these guys, it's kind of almost like being home.
Exactly. So, rode quite a bit, but well, I think that's the thing, especially if you've been brought up in a world of pseudo chaos that is, comforting to these people. And then when they transition out, that becomes their framework. That becomes a blueprint of how not to have the chaotic childhood that they had.
So this always gets everyone's eyeballs out there a little bit. My dad cheated on his wife with my mom. And so that's how I showed up. And so when basically my dad got a hold of me, and he always wanted a son. He had 4 daughters, and the first son that he had, it didn't work out. He was too hard on him. That kid, he rejected him, and it was just tough. Then he had 4 daughters, and he always wanted a son. And then he cheated on his wife with my mom, and I showed up, and he's like, well, I've always wanted a son, and this was my chance. And he basically put me on his arm, walked me in the house. I think I was 4 years old, had a group meeting, threw me on the kitchen table, and I'm looking at 4 girls and this older lady that you couldn't see her eyes because she had dark glasses on. And he basically said, this is my son. You can like it and stay, or you can not like it and leave. So there's a lot of animosity that I kind of had a little bit growing up in that household, if you can imagine, right? Now, my stepmom, what an angel. She raised me like her own. She was amazing. But it was also difficult growing up with a lot of insecurities, with a lot of the way people would talk and this and that. And so the dynamic of my childhood was very dysfunctional. But in the same sense, it took me a long time to grow up because of that. But it's amazing how much I had learned just through that chaos a little bit. And so, like I said, nothing was ever in a real healthy relationship. And that affected a lot of my relationships going forward from there. But it just enhanced the fact that I got such a thrill, and I got such a love for roping because I was able to get away from all that, if that makes sense. I was able to get confidence through that. I got attention through that because I was really good at what I did. And it would also help me to where I was able to get out of there. I was able to go blaze my own trail, blaze my own path, chase that. And so I would just basically kind of hide all that other stuff to just basically focus on how am I going to get good enough so I can get out of here? How am I going to get good enough where I can be successful? Now, one of the disillusions that I had was, as I was chasing this basically golden calf, which was to make the NFR, to be the best roper in the world, was that I thought that, man, once I made it, then all my problems will go away because now I'm a celebrity or a star or an NFR cowboy. And I made it, and it was the coolest thing ever. It was like my cup was full. Like I couldn't get no more full driving out to Vegas, being on the big stage, seeing the bright lights. Like I remember when I first made it to the NFR, we go down there. I've never been there, never seen it, never been on the ground. And I remember in the head box, which is I roped the steer around the head. I remember going in the head box, just falling over and doing a dirt angel. Like I finally made it. Like this is it. Like my whole world's going to change now. And I remember there was somebody up there that was hanging banners. There was a part of the crew that was getting everything ready for the rodeo. And I remember hearing him go, yeah, I think somebody's having a seizure down there. We need a paramedic. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good, man. I was just doing a dirt angel. Got a little excited. And like that's how I literally was just so infatuated with getting this done. And it was the fastest 10 days of my entire life. Like it flew by like that. And when it was done, it was done. Like that was it. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't change none. I'm still the same guy. And I didn't realize how fast that went. And then all of a sudden now you're getting ready for the next year. Everything last year was already done. And now everyone's focused back on who's going to make it again this year. And so it was odd in the fact of, I thought I was going to change my life, and I was still the same person. I still had the same problems. I still had the same internal battles. I still had all the things that I still kind of had, but I was still like, well, at least I made it, and then I'm like, well, I wonder if I can make it again. Then after a while, then I made it again. Then I made it 3 times in a row. Then after a while, I'm just expecting to make it. Now I'm just creating even more pressure on myself to continue to keep making. Now I need a house. Now I need a barn. Now I need to build a life around the fact that now I'm actually making a living doing what I'm doing. And going through that to, I don't know, I think I went to my first pro rodeo in 1995 and I retired in 2000. So 25 years around there. And, when I started winding down after making enough NFRs and slowing down and then the glamour wasn't near as bright as it was. And, I was able to retire in my last year that I rodeoed and made the NFR in the same time. So I was able to call it quits and leave on my terms, which for me was extremely, it was meaningful. It was meaningful for me. And, one of the things that was hard about my career is because, and I think anytime you're trying to chase success, what are you willing to sacrifice? I was willing to sacrifice everything to be successful. And so that meant my first marriage. That meant, not going to some of your best friends' weddings, missing some of your family members' birthdays. I was willing to sacrifice all those things to be successful. And it just got to where there toward the end of my career, I was just kind of burnt out with the selfishness that I had. That was all about me so much. And that's when I felt like when I was able to give back and do certain things, it was actually had more of a purpose and meaning that I hadn't felt, that almost felt as good as making the NFR. And, that's one of the things too, is that when you're chasing those goals as a young kid, that's to make it, but then also to be able to, I've seen so many guys too that at the end of their career, when they're done, man, they're in a tough spot. They've never thought about the end of their career. They don't know how to handle not being on the pedestal anymore. It's a huge drop for a lot of those guys because they never really pivoted. I think there was a time to where I think once I was in the retirement mode to be able to chase this new goal of mine there was kind of a rebuilding phase. There was that, okay, this is not who I am anymore. So now how am I going to pivot? Now how am I going to take that same energy to be successful and then now do it to something else, to where I was able to find purpose again? And I think for me, I have more purpose now than I did when I was rodeoing, because when I was rodeoing, it was just literally just to succeed and to be successful. And now it's almost a greater calling to feel like I'm doing basically what God created me to do. I feel like, I think making the NFR was what God blessed me to do. He gave me a set of skills to be able to be one of the best headers in the world. But then now I feel like he's been able to work on me, that now what am I going to do for him, for the skills that he gave me? How am I able to give back with the talents that he gave me and bless others and do it and make an impact in this world? And it's just been really cool to see that transformation into what it's become now.
I want to get into transition because there's so much to unpack there, and it mirrors military first responders so much. But just going back to, again, using this sport initially to, to glean some positivity in an arguably chaotic environment. I think we talked yesterday when we were chatting before. I had Buck Brannaman on the show, and he was a cowboy, a television cowboy, and his dad wasn't. He just used his children really as props to get money through cereal commercials and all these other things. And he has a very heartbreaking story, and ultimately was taken under a local sheriff's wing, and he worked on a horse ranch, and he developed this incredible bond with the horse. And now obviously he's kind of the person who the Horse Whisperer was based on, and that kind of equine therapy model as well. When you reflect back now with this wiser lens that you have, what impact did that relationship with the horse have on you emotionally as a young boy? It's
a great question, and that's a great topic. I'm a clinician now, so I teach people how to rope, and horsemanship is one of the biggest topics that we discuss as we're teaching people how to learn how to rope. And, one of the things that horsemanship will do is it'll bring out your insides. It'll really expose what's going on. Your horse will let you know if you're being too passive, because your horse will just run all over you. Your horse will also let you know if he's scared of you that you're probably being too much of a dictator. Now, I treated my horses a lot like how I was raised. When they did good, I petted them. When they didn't do very good, I was hard on them. So that was my internal battle. That's some of the things that I struggled with growing up. And my dad, when I did good, he was so proud of me. When I did good, he was so embarrassed that he's like, I can't even believe that you even, would do that, or even ever made it and stuff. And, I had a story one time that, my dad had cancer when he was in 2009. And I was trying to come home more often when I was making the NFR. And one year, I believe it was 2012. And at this point, when I was making the NFR, it's like my dad never missed an NFR from 2008 or some 1984. He went to the NFR every single year and watched it. He was one of the biggest fans of rodeo. I made the NFR in 2005. I made the NFR again in 2006, and he didn't go. I had tickets, and he didn't go. I never understood that even till now. I don't think he probably even understood it, to be honest with you. There was something there that jealousy and insecurity. I can't tell you. I wouldn't be able to tell you. And honestly, I think if he was on this podcast, I don't even know if he was still alive, he would be able to tell you. It's just one of those odd things that when a guy thinks dealing with something, you don't know how to deal with it, so you just ignore it. So that was how rocky our relationship was for a really long time. Hit and miss, hit and miss. And I remember when I was coming home in 2012, and I came and visited him with him. My dad was really good with horses, really, really good. My dad loved horses. He couldn't stand people. Like that was always his mantra. He was like, well, people have ears and they can understand English, so they should be able to figure it out. A horse can't. So he loved horses, and horses loved him. They really, really did. You could go out in a pasture and he would raise colts, and all the colts would come running to him. Like they loved him. And he had just a good, soft heart to animals. And so I remember when 2012, one summer, I came home and I was entering some rodeos, and I was getting some stuff figured out. And that morning on the phone, and my dad was down there in the round pen jacking with his colt. And you can see him from the house and stuff down the round pen. And I seen him. He was jacking with this horse for, 45 minutes, helping it where he could pick his feet up, where he can clean it and stuff like that. And the horse is kicking. He's like, oh, now stop that, And he almost pinning his ears back. Oh, my gosh, you're not that angry. You settle down, Just as patient as can be, right? And finally, after a while, this horse is just standing there, soft and subtle as could be, picking up all his feet, and he rubbed on him and turned him back out. So we're down there, and I'm like, the whole time I'm thinking, man, I'm here for a couple of days. Like, I need to go do some stuff with my dad. Like, we need to go. Like, I don't know how much longer this is going to be. Like, I need to make sure instead of just hanging out talking, like, let's go do something. So I remember this. It kind of organically happened, but also kind of had it in my head to kind of pull this out because we got along, but it didn't take nothing to, like, get him snapped off, right? What was some of the things that was pretty interesting when I was trying to get my life put together, Jesus Christ was one of the biggest thing for me was when I turned my life around, when I started becoming a Christian, when people were helping mentor me, when I was able to change my crowd to get around the right people. My dad seen that. And when he got diagnosed with cancer, he quit chewing, he quit drinking, cold turkey, just quit cussing. Took a little bit longer, but he went from never going to church, never going to live in a town that had more churches than bars, to now all of a sudden going to church twice a week and softening up. And our relationship was getting better. And there was one time I remember when I was at the rodeo in Pendleton, Oregon, and I made the short round, and he had called. He's like, hey, I heard you made the short round, great. I'm going to come watch you. And, I got to thinking, if you weren't doing nothing, I was going to get baptized on Sunday, about 3.5 hours from Pendleton. There, we lived in Prineville, Oregon. And if you're not busy, would you come? And I'm like, Dad, I'm off that day. I'll come down. I'll be there. Oh, that's be great. And this is my dad's humor, right? And he goes, well, while you're there, I was thinking, I'm just kind of new to this Christian thing here a little bit because I've seen what you have done. So I want to do this more often. I think this is where I need to go, but I'm a little bit unfamiliar kind of with these priests. Not really sure how much I can trust them. Same thing, like a lot of us had a bad experience with a church or a pastor or something along the lines where it turns you off of it. Now he's reading the book, learning more about it, but then still not quite sure about these pastors, right? And he goes, so I figure since you were there, maybe you could baptize me. And I'm like, you want me to baptize you? And he's like, well, yeah, if you're already there, why wouldn't you? Yeah. All right, you got it. I'll do that. So I drove down there and I baptized him. And it was funny. Like they get him in the water and he's in his little swim trunks and I'm holding the back of his head and he goes down and the preacher is praying over him and he's, all right, now plug your nose, and said something about the Son, the Holy Ghost. And right about that time, the Spirit, something like that. And I went to drop him down. All of a sudden his hands come out of nowhere on the side of this trough. And he looks at me right in the eye and he goes, now, I know we've had a lot of beef, but this is no time to get even. And have the whole congregation just laughing and just in an uproar. But that was my dad. Like that was his humor. He had an amazing talent to be funny at the right times. And so I got to baptize my dad. And our relationship got a lot better. But like I said, to go back to this story, it didn't also take much to where if I did one little thing, it could still set him off. Like I had that effect. So we're out there and at his house in 2012, and he just got done jacking with this colt. And I said, hey, I'm needing some help with my riding. Like, been out there on the rodeo, and there's some certain places because my dad could ride with 2 fingers and a halter. Like his horses were so soft. They were so quiet. And I said, man, mine's panicking a little bit in the spot right here where it's not allowing me to handle the steer where I want. And it's been costing me some money. And I said, man, you ride so good and your horses collect so well. Could we just go ride and you kind of help me understand this? Because there's something I'm not understanding. Yeah, let me get on my horse. So he goes and gets on his horse, and we're out there riding. He's explaining to me how, because he studies this stuff. He studies Buck Brenneman. He studies Chris Cox, Clinton Anderson, all the way back to Tom Dorrance, Ray Hunt, John Lyons. Like he loved the horsemanship side of things. I didn't. I wanted to rope. And so he's throwing all this lingo that he's expecting that I should know that I've got no idea what he's talking about. And he's throwing it out there, and I'm not picking it up. Sure enough, the cuss words that he's been trying to bury so much come flying back out again. And slap dick, I can't believe how the hell do you even make the NFR? He's hollering. And I'm laughing because I was like, man, this didn't take long for that old nerve to kind of come popping back out. And I just start laughing, and I ride up to him. And I remember it to this day. And he's like, I just can't believe you can't figure this out. I said, Dad, I tell you what, I watched you jack with that colt for like 45 minutes just so you could pick his feet up so you can clean the damn things out. That didn't need cleaned anyway. Just kind of over exaggerating, right? And I said, and I'm watching this horse kick at you and it's not bothering you. And I'm watching him pin his ears back and you're just like, oh, will you stop it? I said, I've never seen so much patience in someone with horses, but not with humans. And I understand English, but like, if you will show me the same patience that you show that colt, I promise you I'll get it. I can do anything if you would give me the same patience that you showed that colt. That was the last argument we ever had. Ever. He went from my biggest critic to my biggest fan that day. And so when I tell people and I talk about horsemanship, that's one of the things that created probably the best time in that 8 years between me and my dad. The bond that we had riding horses. We're some kids and dads, maybe it's in the back porch playing catch with the baseball. At the end of my career, that was me and my dad out riding horses, learning the psychology of a horse, learning how one thought, learning how to place your hands and feet, that puzzle that you're trying to figure out in that horse's mind. That was what brought me and my dad to a spot where that was the last time I heard him cuss. That makes sense. and it really did. It was very special, and what that time together we had after that meant to me.
So early on, you had this, praise a horse when it's doing well, scold a horse when it's not. What was that shift? What was that evolution to the horseman that you've become today?
Going back to me, did that help me when I was wrong, or did that panic me? And grace, who were the people that gave me grace? And when they did, how did I act? Was I willing? Or, when you're scolding a horse and it didn't know any better, the horse now is confused. Now its guard's up. I can relate to that. Okay, what about the guys when I screwed up at their house when I'd stay there and I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to get my ass kicked, or I'm going to get thrown out, or this and that. And I said, no, we're just going to go fix it. The pressure that just came off of me. And I'm like, that's it? Like, that's all? He goes, if you break, he goes, did you do it on purpose? No. Then let's go fix it. So that grace, when a horse messes up, did he mean to? Probably not. So then how do you show that horse grace and be consistent and help that horse being able to perform in confidence, knowing that it knows its job and not scared to not do its job? Those are two completely different aspects on how competitors think and how, horses are athletes as well. We were athletes, so are horses. So if I competed scared, how did I compete? If that horse competes scared, how's he going to work? So it was my internal battles that I started working with myself. Probably one of the best quotes that I ever heard anyone ever tell me. I got to rope with a legend named Allan Back in the middle of my career. And I was missing, and I'm berating myself. I'm just telling me, I suck. I can't believe I do that. I'm so stupid. Like everything that I'd heard growing up. And I remember him telling me one time, he says, man, you sure are hard on yourself when you miss. So I gotta be. If I'm not, who's gonna be out here? Like, we're no pussies, like, right? And he's like, well, that's one way to look at it. But he goes, who are some of your best friends out here? So I rattled off some of my best friends out here that competed. And they said, what if they missed? What if they threw that same loop that you just threw? Would you talk to them the way you're talking to yourself? Would you tell them the same thing you would tell yourself? No. Why not? Well, they probably wouldn't miss like that. He goes, you're going to try to tell me they haven't missed? Well, that makes sense. He goes, maybe if you started talking to yourself like you were your best friend or like one of your best friends, I bet you'd probably quit this internal battle you have going on within yourself. Wow. I never really thought about that. So I walked away and he goes, well, where are you going? I didn't mean to offend you, did he? I said, no, you didn't offend me at all. He said, where are you going? I said, I've got to go buy myself a beer. I've got a lot of apologizing to do because I have been a dick to myself for a long time, and I probably owe myself a beer. And that was one of those things. I kind of learned that about me. And so then I tried to apply that with the horses. The horses that I had the most success with was the horses that had an extremely tough childhood. The horses that had an extremely tough owner before me. So they had went through hell before they got to me. I could relate to that. So I knew that horse just needed a friend. Now the spoiled ones, we didn't get along very good because I didn't understand that language. I understood what it was like when things were too serious and how to like encourage them. And so that was the mold and a lot of the early relationships that I had, because I noticed that when that horse understood what I was asking and I gave it praise, those horses would go to battle for me. When things got on the line, when I needed them the most, that's when they would run under me and do anything. Like it felt like we were in the trenches together. And that was just something that it was interesting, because it was what I didn't realize at the time was that it was familiar. If that made sense.
It does. It's funny because just listening to you talk, it mirrors, what I've said many, many times on here, which is, and we're a similar age. when we were young, growing up, our at least on the screen, the men that were presented to us as the masculine ones were the bodybuilders that made films, the Schwarzeneggers, the Stallones, the Van Dams, and so it was this, beat everyone up, have no emotions whatsoever. And then, you ultimately get into an arena where there's real tough men and women, whether it's bull riding or roping or, firefighting or the military. And that same facade is what destroys men and women, because that's not a human being. A human being isn't a white circle. It's a yin and a yang. And when you see the real courageous men and women, they absolutely are hard as nails when it's needed, but they're also courageous enough to be vulnerable. Yeah. And I think once we accept that, male and female, but especially men in this world, that whole facade of masculinity that sadly is being kind of peppered on the screens once again, that's what puts people in graves, because that is not what a human being is supposed to be. And I always allude to the beginning of Band of Brothers. Look in the eyes of those real soldiers when they're talking. Are they saying, "Oh, don't cry, you're being a pussy"? No, they're in tears, and that happened almost 80 years before they were filming that.
When I went home and was able to talk to my stepmom a lot more about my dad and his relationship with his dad, now that I've gotten older, like I said, I've humanized him now. And, I'm so interested in that. How did my dad and his dad get along? And what I kind of heard that a little bit, but it relates now, is that, so my dad never finished the same school year in a school. So that's how much my grandpa moved around, I guess. So once he got back from the war, I don't know what I'd call him. I think that he couldn't hold a job. He didn't like being told what to do, I guess. That's what she was kind of saying. So they were moving a lot. So that dysfunction, right? This is that constant dysfunction. And then he would tell me too, he said, as soon as I move into a new school, back then there's always the bully. The bully always took on the new kid in school. Mm-hmm. He said, after a while, I just knew the routine. Apply for the new school, get in there. He said, I just went and head straight for the bully. Let's get it over with. And it was done. And it was interesting in the fact that chaos, dysfunction, and I guess his dad had a different wife after different wife as well. And so, lust was probably our biggest downfall between the Crawford name, from sound like my grandpa to my dad to me at the time. And so when she said that he loved the structure of it, you could tell that's how he parented. The problem is like, I can see where when you go to the military and you're 18 and you've had all this shit upbringing, that at that point in time, you can tear somebody down and pull that shit off of them, re-strip them, and then remold them. I don't think you can tear them down when they don't have that experience. And I think that's where my dad messed up, was the tear down was before I even did anything. So like when you talk about a young colt and you start getting onto that colt when he doesn't know any better, you're tearing nothing down. You're just tearing his confidence away. Now it'd be a lot different if he came and he's kicking at you and acting out and he knew better and you had to like strip all that stuff away and remold him. Is a lot different than if you started off that way when he's a young colt. So how does that colt act? He's resentful. He's scared of you. He has no confidence. He runs when he sees you. That was my childhood. When my dad would show up, I didn't know who was going to be there. It was like a grenade that the pin was pulled out and you just was waiting for something to explode all the time. That's how a lot of times my horses felt when I was younger. I had that same, I could feel the generational curse being inside of me as well, because that's what we knew. It took reading the Bible. It took me and my dad getting in a better place. It took me becoming better horsemen and understanding that those internal battles I've got to deal with first in order to become a good horseman and a good dad now. And I would probably credit my dad, even though it wasn't correct, it was still a lot to learn from. I always tell everyone I wouldn't be who I was without him. Even though I learned a lot what not to do, it's still learning. And so that helped me with my horsemanship. In turn, that also helped me with now becoming the dad now that I want to be. I'm not scared to whip my kid's ass, but there's a line. I remember my dad always told me that. I remember one time I got my ass kicked, and I'm like, look, I told you, Dad, I didn't do it. And I had witnesses. They're like, no, he didn't do it. That guy did. My dad's excuse, or my dad's compliment, or what he would say after that, well, that just makes up for the ones you got away with.
Well, you're a detective now too.
And so like now is like, instead of wondering if I'm going to get my ass kicked, I want my kid to know he's going to get his ass kicked. I want to know there is a clear line between good and bad. And to me, that's the thing that I've learned with the horsemanship. And then also where my dad didn't know that good from bad himself. And so that's where the Bible's helped me so much, and knowing what's good and what's bad. And anyway, I kind of got drifted off there, but it's just, it's ironic though, how I can relate to where the demons he had with the demons you see horsemanship have as well, is because what will come out of them will usually show up in their horsemanship. That's what I think was so phenomenal, the internal battle that he had, but it didn't reflect in his horsemanship when he got later. It was really pretty phenomenal.
Going back to, you mentioned the transition as you got away from the NFR. There's a documentary called The Weight of Gold, and it's got Michael Phelps and a load of other Olympians on. And these are, athletes that were doing these sports when they were, single-digit children all the way through to this point. And it mirrors the first responders, the military so well, because there's elements of identity, tribe, purpose, respect, or being put on a pedestal, if you like. And then one day it stops, whether you step off the Olympic podium and you've aged out, or whether you leave a fire station for the last time. And it can be crippling for all those things if you haven't got that next step and you haven't separated who you are from what you do. So talk to me about that transition and how jarring it was for you.
So I'd watched a lot of guys rodeoing and watched their castle that was built on sand just get washed away through the rainstorm of when they didn't make it. They basically lived like there would never be another not NFR. They didn't, I watched guys that win world titles and just throw their belt buckle away. Like, is this all it is? So I seen that false idol, as they talked about in the Bible. To me, that's what I was very, very careful of, even though I did it. But later in my career, I was very, very cautious about the false idol. Because if I put if rodeoing's if that's who I am, this is going to be a very abrupt fall from grace. Because you can't maintain it. No one that has any realistic mindset can realize that, even though what I do, you can do it for a pretty long time compared to bull riding. Realizes that, like, there's going to have to be a day where you're going to have to face reality. There's going to be a day where this shiny carrot stick that you're chasing, or that shiny diamond, whatever it is, eventually it's going to be, there's going to be something that's going to have to replace it. And so I was very cautious about the fact that this is what I did, but it wasn't who I was. Now, it was tough because that's all I knew. The transition, I think, was when I decided that was going to be it, because my wife is a very, very successful roper. She's way more successful than I was. She's a 23-time world champion. When we had our son in 2017, it lit a fire up under me, and I was doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden it dropped. The pressure of trying to win, and because it's just like hunting, man, you eat what you kill. And when you're competing, you get to pay your bills when you're winning. And when you don't, it doesn't. So it's a very, very tricky line of work. And to be a dad and to have this pressure to win, and I'm at my later stage in my career. And then when she was pregnant with our little girl, I was actually, that last year I roped better than I ever roped in my entire career. Like, I was getting underneath of it. My horses were getting really good. I had a really good partner. Everything was hitting. My sponsors were coming back. And it was like when she was pregnant, but then now breakawaying's taken off, like what she does for a living. And it was like, man, for both of us to rodeo, and I just don't see that. And I said, man, what do you think I should do? And I asked her, and she's like, well, man, with what I'm doing was really taking off for next year. And she's like, I'd really like to chase it. And I'm like, I've already made 10 NFRs. Like, this was way beyond anything I ever dreamed of that I would ever be able to do. So I'm like, honestly, being able to say that this is my last NFR and knowing this is going to be my last NFR, I bet I could be good with this. So I was able to call it mid-season that this is it. I'm done. So I was able to rodeo and drive. And when I'm driving, especially by myself, that's when I can do a lot of really good thinking. And it was kind of like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to become? And so real estate was really something that was kind of intriguing. I was reading some books by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was kind of changing my mindset a little bit on what I wanted to do later. I was also doing a lot of lessons where I was teaching people how to rope because it was during COVID year. So a lot of people weren't working. They were roping a lot more. So I was really, really busy with lessons. That was taking off. And this me and my wife started a military clinic that I taught military guys how to rope in 2014. So from 2014, I had a military clinic where I invited anyone who had ever served. It was free. We opened up our house. The stalls were free. The plug-ins were free. Come stay. The whole town got behind it. They would come in and cater. The rodeo committee here in town, they would come and serve and dish all the guys up. So my sponsors got behind it. We had prizes. And also, too, one of my dear friends and also guys that I rope with, a guy named Trey Johnson, who's an ordained minister, he did the healing. So I did the head and he did the healing. Well, he was bringing his ministries to the clinic. Well, after 6 years, this thing has taken off to where it's more than just a clinic. There was guys giving their life to Christ at this clinic. There was people who were getting help with their PTSD because of Trey through this clinic. I was even learning more about this through the clinic. And I'd be kind of creating such a bond with these guys that when I retired in 2020 and it was going into my last year, we were getting, they said, I had them handle the entries of who was coming in because I wanted to make sure that who was coming to my house, they vetted just to make sure that there's nothing that with my family here, I'm unfamiliar with it. So I wanted somebody that kind of had my six. And so they said, look, man, we ran this thing through our little social media, which you've only got like a few hundred followers, and we're getting like hundreds of phone calls on this clinic. He's like, have you ever thought about having a roping? And so this is my last NFR, trying to figure out a little bit of what I want to do. And then this military thing on the side is just has a fire lit up under it to where it's like, do I kind of keep it where it's at and let it smolder down, or do I take the cap off this thing and let it explode? So I've got all these things in my last year of rodeo that I want to do. My clinics are doing good. I thought about maybe doing the futurities because I was pretty good with horses. I've got this military event. I'm going to liquidate all my assets when I retire. So I'm going to be able to build on some land that I had to be able to do some real estate. And I've got all these things, right, that I wanted to do. And so when I retired, I had plenty that was kind of in my head. And anything almost too much. All I knew is like, all right, whatever I decide that I'm going to do, if I'll just put the same amount of effort into this as what I did when I roped, I know there's no way I can fail. I know what it takes to be successful at this. Now, I just got to figure out which one of these is going to be what I want to make sure I go all in on. So the real estate I got all in on, and I was developing a lot of the stuff around here. And when these guys told me that they wanted to have a roping, now 30 days prior to this is when they decided, before the clinic was 30 days, and they said, look, we're getting 100 foot. Instead of a school, why don't we just have a jackpot where everyone can show up? And I'm like, I tell you what, let's do the clinic. But if we do this roping, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it right. So I got the Stephenville Arena here in town. They donated it. I got 30,000 added in sponsorship money, which brought the NFR guys in. They were all getting ready for the NFR. So the top 15 headers, top 15 healers in the world were all coming to this event. We invited all the military guys for the clinic. Then we had a roping specifically for military first responders, and then also another roping I called the Mil First Pro, where the military and first responders get to rope with the guys going to the NFR. And then after that, I was like, all right, guys, sit back, relax, head to the beer tent. Now we're going to watch the top 15 ropers in the world roping the exact same setup as the NFR. So if you've never seen it, this is what it looks like from eye level. And I basically put on a mini NFR for them. And it was awesome. We found some auction items, and get this, there's three of us that were putting this whole thing on. And we get done and all the items and the dust settles this one day, and we raised almost $50,000, and we were able to help put a lady that was disabled from war. I forget exactly what branch. I think she might have been in the Army. It was such a whirlwind. I forget exactly what all happened during all that. But we were able to help with building homes for heroes, put her in a home. And I was like, that was one of the first times where I ever felt like I was able to give back. I had been so selfish with my whole career that if I don't do this and if I don't do that, I'm not going to be successful. I never had time to give back. And that was one of the first times I kind of felt where when God talks about how he's going to give you the ability, but you've got to do it through his glory. That was the first time I felt that. I was like, okay, now I think I see what he means by that. And I'm like, man, that was a pretty good event. There was guys that came up to me after that telling me it was the best day of their life. That was the coolest thing they've ever experienced. And I'm like, man, for me, that was a slap in the face for me, just to me, because what was the best day of this guy's life is something I do every day. And it's like it really grounded me in the fact of like, damn, I got to remember, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. I get to do this. What I do every day was the best day that this guy ever had. So that gratitude, trying to pull that gratitude back in and the appreciation with what I do. And then I had a couple of guys come up to me and told me they would help keep the gun out of their mouth. And I didn't expect that. I'd become pretty good buds one year at a rodeos that we were putting on that were showing up at the rodeos with an organization called 22 Kill. And that was the first time that I realized that they were helping explain to me that 22 military guys kill themselves every single day. And when those guys were putting some of that out there, and the fact that like, it's one thing when you hear it and see it, another thing when you're looking straight into the eyes of it. And I battled with that growing up. I'd had a noose around my neck. I had a gun in my mouth. It was one of those things that I understood it, but not in their level. I didn't understand what they were going through. Not one time would I ever say that I understand what they were going through, other than I understand what that tendency is like. That was one of the things that when things didn't go right, I didn't know how to handle it, and just seemed like that was the easiest way to make the pain stop. Now, luckily, I was able to hear God's voice, even though I wasn't very familiar with God, that it kept those things from happening to me. It was also one of those things that I'd kind of buried that down for a long time and kind of forgotten about those tendencies I had at a young age. When they were bringing that up, I was remembering kind of that experience that I had with that. And I looked back at it with the gratitude eyes that those guys helped me look through it. And I was like, if I'd have did that, look at what I would have never experienced. Look at the 10 NFRs I got to experience. I'm looking at two of the most beautiful kids that I've ever seen in my life that are mine that I would never have got to experience. A beautiful wife. And I was like, man, I need to tell that story more often when people ask me to give a testimony, because who knows who's listening? Who knows that if somebody's thinking that they're just trying to make the pain go away, that there's a way that you can suffer through that pain in a healthier way, but then look at what you might be able to do that you would have never dreamt about. And that's what I kind of tell that story, and the fact that If I did, I would have never experienced this. If I did, I would have never experienced the guys that I've met with the military and the men and women that fight to keep us free, and the men and women in law enforcement that keep our streets safe. And, now when I look at it with 2 kids, that stuff never crosses my mind, because it's amazing what happens for me is now I'm living for something more than me. I think that was what was so hard earlier in my career was I was living for me, and it was very selfish. Those guys really helped me understand gratitude, and that I was doing something that was just more than team roping. I was doing something more that my industry had ever seen. And I kind of looked at it like that, and I was like, well, if you think that was cool in 30 days, let me show you what I can do in 365. So this thing just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, now this is going into our 6th year. We've helped build over 5 homes. We've helped build 5 homes through Building Homes for Heroes. I don't know how many people that we baptized. We've raised over 1.2 million for military first responders and their families. We've helped law enforcement's families that if they were tragically murdered in the line of duty. We helped with funeral costs. We've helped with the extra money that they have until their benefits come. And I look back at it now, and it's like, now I can feel that purpose. When we're talking about that retirement, I had all these things lined up that I wanted to do. And it took me a few years to find the priority in it. I still fraternity a little bit, but that's my hobby now. That's what I get to do now for fun. My clinics blew up like crazy. I do over 40 some clinics a year. That's my primary way that I make a living. My rentals are up to 9 of them now, but this military event that I do, that's my give back. I keep that in my priority list because, I was a big Charlie Kirk fan, and not as much before he died as I am now. I'm not saying I didn't like him. I followed him, but now that he's passed, you see so much of what he did. And one of the things that I really rang true was when he talked about get married, have kids, and build a legacy. And, I think those words are really true is, what did God put you down here for? What purpose do you have? I don't know how many, we've got 2 or 3 guys that have moved to Stephenville because of this event. They'll live here now. We hang out, we rope all the time. Some from the Carolinas, some from Arkansas, but they're coming here, man, and they're in my Bible study group, and we're brothers. I've never felt what it was like in the rodeo industry. You don't feel this. They're your buds, but I've never felt what it's like that I felt like somebody would actually jump in front of me and take a bullet. When you think about that as a civilian, rarely does anyone ever have that experience of feeling that. I feel myself very lucky that I do. I'm a civilian that knows what that feels like. Most of the guys are men and women in blue and serve the military that know what that feels like, and learned a lot of what it's like to have a brotherly bond, and I love it. So now we're going on our 6th year, and now this event's just the legs under it now is unbelievable.
When you were talking about, not hearing God's voice when you were younger, and that pulling you out of that kind of suicide ideation, as I've kind of listened to hundreds and hundreds of people who have been in crisis, because I've got over 1,100 interviews now, and it's amazing, even if we're not supposed to be talking about mental health, how often that comes up and how many people did get to that point. And when there is this perfect storm of all these contributing factors, because it's not one, it's all these things are lining up to this perfect storm, it shifts someone's perception of reality. It really does. And whether you look at it neurochemically, or whether you look at it, the shift from God's voice to the devil's voice, however you want to interpret it, there is that shift from, I need to be here for my wife, for my kids, for my husband, for whoever, my dog, whoever's most important to you, to you're a burden to them. And if you just pull that trigger, if you just step off that chair then their pain will go away. And of course, it makes no sense at all, but this is what I hear over and over and over again. And being able to pull someone back away from that temporary psychosis and get them, to where they're able to kind of come down off that for a second, but then lean into all these things that I've had on the show. And this is a beautiful example of that. This community that you're finding, this equine therapy and what you're doing, you're pulling that person away from that devil's voice and putting it back into, the voice of God, or, the voice of reason, or whatever, again, someone's certain beliefs are. But it kills me because when we were young, we were told that suicide was selfish and cowardly, and how could you, and think of your children. But if you listen to these people, that's where they're at. They truly believe. And so it becomes selfless and courageous. It's wrong because it's a distorted perception. But at that moment, that's what they truly believe. So then you get these professions, that have literally said, I will die for a complete stranger overseas in my community. And it makes it even more of a temptation because you've already signed that blank check, as it were. So it's beautiful to hear that these experiences are pulling some of these veterans and police officers away from that same place that you were when you were younger.
What I found is that I would say one of the movies that probably was very profound and kind of shifted some thinking that I had was American Sniper. Yeah, I love Chris Kyle. I love that movie. One of my favorites. But when he kept wanting to be deployed, and they kept asking him why, and he was like, "Well, people need saving. Countries." I forget. I'm paraphrasing. Obviously, I can't remember exactly what he told the counselor when he was trying to get back out there and serve again. And you could see the problems that he was having coming home, being able to shut it off. It's not like when you're on red alert, you can just turn that off. And that movie, I thought, really captivated how hard it is just to be able to quiet that noise down in that battle that he was having. But when that guy told him, he says, and he said, let's go take a look around. And so they went and walked around, and all the people that were here in the States that were blown up or that were having heck and this and that, he goes, there's plenty of guys right here that need saving. And you could see that kind of rattled. It was a different perspective. You could see it. Then we started taking those guys shooting on when they're in their wheelchair, and he was taking them out to the range and he was helping them shoot. And then the one guy had a spotter, and they were going through the math of being able to get the bullet in the bullseye, and bam, he gets the bullseye, and the guy goes, "Oh man, I feel good. I feel like I got my balls back." I can't tell you how many times I've heard that when I'm get these guys on their horses and they turn the steer for the very first time. Guys are like, "Damn, I felt good. I feel like I got my balls back." I've heard that before. Mm-hmm. So that really resonated with me. That was like purpose for me. That was like, damn, these guys are finding something where they're filling a little bit of that hole, that void. For me, it was helping because I was having purpose and doing something that was greater than me. For them, it was because they were finding something that was that adrenaline rush, that competitiveness, the bond between them and a horse, maybe a little bit of purpose. But to me, that's where it seems like it's so hard is when a guy loses that purpose. I don't know if we're wired like that as men to not have purpose. I've seen so many guys that when they talk about their serving in the military or even on the police forces, there was purpose. And then coming back home, and then they told me it's basically like a caboose. When you're in the military, it's a freight train. Anything that happens, you just throw in the back of the caboose, friend gets shot, throw them back to the caboose. See something that you should have never seen, throw them back to the caboose. This is something you can never unsee, throw them back. Like it's going so fast. And they say when you come home, and it's like that, everything just comes to a complete halt, and all those memories and everything just floods your mind to where they don't show anyone how to. It seems like our government has let our military down, and the fact that no one is there helping them develop the tools in their mind to be able to help with those experiences or trauma that they have. And now that you can see that there's so many organizations now that are trying to help with that, but that's the way they explained it to me, and trying to understand kind of what a lot of these guys are going through. So the fact that team roping is you're moving, you're riding, you're moving, you're doing stuff. And that's how the mind's designed to work. And when it stops is when they have heck. And so that's helped me understand a little bit, is when we're doing this, is the goal is to stay moving and laugh and take jabs at each other and have the camaraderie and it's something that I don't know. It's when I hearing God's voice and seeing Him use me to be able to do something I never would have dreamt, for the baddest guys in the world, men and women of the world. That stuff means a lot to me. But it's cool that I never would have dreamt in a million years that just roping steers would have put me in a situation where it's helping people cope with things, that be able to help them get the guys get their balls back and getting purpose amongst some of these men and women again. It's been pretty cool.
It just makes so much sense because it's checking so many of the boxes that we know are healing. Ironically, the opposite of what everyone was told to do during COVID, but have community, be vulnerable, have exercise, be outside, be uncomfortable, get dirty. I mean, all these things that, I grew up with in farm life are so great for healing, I mean, just being out in nature, that relationship with the horse. So, it really does resonate deeply. Another interesting thing that I'm starting to see surface now as a conversation, and I think it needs to happen. I grew up, exposed to Christianity. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in God, but my own relationship is more kind of singular. But the teachings that are within the Bible, align with many other holy books, and they are, if you boil it down, don't be a dick, like be a good person. It's pretty easy to figure that out. But I see Christianity hijacked and used as a tool for negativity, as a tool for division. What made you choose the church that you did? And obviously, I mean, listening to what you have been talking about today, you are, understanding the compassion, the empathy, the kindness that I think these holy books teach. How are you, what is your perception of the way this religion has been hijacked and been used, but in a way that I would argue Jesus would be down here flipping tables if he saw the way that it was being distorted?
100%. Well, the devil's a hell of a marketer. Though this is a world that's temporary, and the devil's a hell of a marketer. The devil had me as a young age. I didn't know the difference between love and lust. So he had me tricked from the start. Cool comes with a lot of fine print. Smoking was cool. Drinking was cool. Chicks were cool. Well, there's a lot of fine print in all of that. The devil doesn't expose the fine print. So when a guy's living false, for me, not having church in my life at a young age, my mom took me to I loved swimming as a young kid. So there was a Bible camp that she sent me to where you could go swim all the time in the river. And so that at least got me there. She wasn't very religious, but she sent me there. But what it did is it at least created the voice in my head that there was a conversation a little bit every once in a while between me and God, even though I didn't understand him. MTV, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, White Snake, watching Tawny Katane, on the hood of White Snake's car with the snake skin dress, like that stuff, like I said, that was the devil's marketing tool for me as a young age. That all was glamorous, right? And so, so I was tricked into a lot of the tools that the devil used and being able to get you captivated with lust and all those things. And that was my vice. And so I would say from teenage years, college, up through my 30s in a way, I always said it like this. I knew who God kind of was, but I didn't know who the devil was. So I always put it like this. If I was watching a football team, or if I was watching a football game, I couldn't tell whose team was on whose, if that made sense. So when that Allan Back, the guy that I was telling you about, that now structure was something I was appealed to a lot too. You know, when I was in college, one of my best friends, we went to his place and went and ate for Christmas. I stayed there. I never took my hat off walking inside. I never prayed before a meal. I never seen someone treat his wife and put him on a pedestal like that. It was one of those structured things, kind of like my dad talked about the Marines, that I had seen that I wanted to live, but I didn't know how. So I had seen little things like that in other people's families that I was very attracted to. But when I was roping with that guy that I was telling you about, that Allan Back, he was also an ordained minister. And when we roped together, he helped me understand who Jesus was. And I would say it like this. I believe it was Galatians 5, verse 22, I believe. And it talked about the fruit of the Spirit. And it talked about joy, peace, happiness, grace, love, like all the things that it talks about in the fruit of the Spirit. What I started understanding was those guys that were living through a biblical lens, they had that. And it was so attractive when I was there. They were so peaceful to be around. I was like, how can I be like those guys? Then it rewound to Galatians 5, I believe, verse 17, and it talked about the sinful nature. Well, the sinful nature I understood. That was the life I was living. Lust, jealousy, bitterness, impatience, anger. So that's the first time I noticed finally who was wearing what jersey. And that gave me at least an idea of like, okay, how do I, instead of focusing on what not to do, how do I focus now to be the fruit of the Spirit? How do I get to where I can live my life in these ways that can create that feeling? And that's probably one of the things that really helped me identify the difference between good and evil.
Now, what about the churches themselves, though? We have this religion that has, at its core, kindness, compassion, love, empathy. But then I see people standing on podiums, and we're talking about, false idols. I think there's a lot of them out there at the moment, especially in politics. But, who are using this for their own personal gain. So, what is your perception on the hijacking of the religion itself?
I feel like there's false prophets. I feel like the Pharisees are basically what our government looks like now. I think Charlie Kirk did a very good job of helping bring a lot of people together, where you're seeing presidents now talking about their faith. We're seeing vice presidents talk about their faith. We've seen a whole group of people at his revival, is what I call it, even though it was his funeral, but it was a revival. Politicians now getting closer to God. There was more people that were affected by Charlie Kirk's death, of people that didn't even know who he was, in my opinion, was because I think God wept when he was assassinated. I feel like we all had something tugging on us that we were maybe never felt before. And I feel like it was the Holy Spirit. I feel like there was when God weeps, I feel like the Holy Spirit arises amongst us. And I feel like that touched so many people. And there were so many people that went to church for the first time. They seen how he handled his debates. They seen, Van Jones, when he got that DM from him after he was assassinated, say, hey, look, I would love to have you on my show. I know we don't see eye to eye, but I think we have a respectful conversation. He was bringing the biblical lens to politics. And it was something that we hadn't seen. It was refreshing. You've seen God use him for his glory. Look at the amount of people marching that, there was no buildings burnt down. There was prayer. And you could see that God was that he gave the glory to God in what he did, and God used him for his glory. And to me, I think that was a huge testament and something that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. That speaks, in my opinion, for itself. I really like Mark Driscoll. I follow him a lot. One of my best friends is an ordained minister, and he ropes, and we do a lot of clinics together. He's always in the Word. He lives it. I've seen it. I believe it. So I'm not having to kind of, and then our minister here, we go hang out a little bit here and there and stuff, but he preaches to where he is not scared to talk about right from wrong. And to me, that's refreshing. He talks about the difference. He truly does speak through the Holy Spirit. And what I love about him is he's not perfect. I think too many pastors try to be perfect. This guy's real. He'll tell you about where he screwed up. He'll tell you about what he learned, and he'll tell you about his mistakes to help you from making those himself. And so those are the people that I feel like that lead me as something who I believe that they have Jesus and the Bible and trying to do it in a way that is correct, and they're not trying to manipulate it themselves. And so that has helped me with understanding it more. And, I think it's hard, when you talk about the faith is, you're trusting that person when you tithe, and you're trusting it. And so to me, it's like, there's a lot of people. I think it's just a matter of going and doing enough churches, because it's taken me a lot of churches to where I've found the ones that challenge me. And that's the challenge when you can feel yourself becoming the better husband. The challenge is when you can feel yourself when you're going to and listen to a pastor where you're being a better dad and a better father, and you're trying to be a better person. That challenge. And I think that Erica Kirk really did an amazing job talking about Charlie's challenge for men, masculine men. You jump in front of your wife. You take care of them. You are the protector of your family. And also talked about what not to do. She's not your servant. She's not your slave. I think that's where masculinity fell in the toxic side of it. I'm okay with that side of it. Masculinity is the man that steps up. We pay the bills. We step up. We make sure that our kids are getting the right nutrition in their food, the right education that they need, the handshake for my little boy, where he shakes his hand and he looks him in the eye and he says, "Yes, sir." When I walk down the street, my wife is on the inside. If there's a car coming, I'm taking the hit. Trying to make sure that I'm looking at the door when we're sitting down, that I'm the protector. To me, that's the masculinity that has gotten pulled away because the devil has done an amazing job with all this woke bullshit that's taken the men away from the home. And we ain't tolerating that shit in my house. So.
Yeah, and just kind of underlining what we talked about before, the other side of the spectrum is the chest beating, manly men, which is bollocks too, because if you are a real man, then you've also got to give space of vulnerability and allow your male child to cry on your shoulder sometimes because they got their heart broken, and that's masculine too.
100%. Yep. Yeah, it is funny when you talk about the difference between little boys and little girls. I always say that my little boy, man, when he first showed up, like, he's got my soul. There's a spot inside of you that you can feel that, this little man is yours, this molding. And it's made me step up and I've felt things I've never felt. If you never had kids, you won't feel it. You don't even know what I'm talking about. And I get it, because I wouldn't have known it either. When that little boy showed up, that soul, I just felt that spot in my soul. And when my little girl showed up, I've never seen anything that had my heart like she does. It's funny that it feels like they're in different spots. Same love, but in different places. And yeah, it's, to me, if for one, everyone asked me, they said, when do you think you've seen God for the first time? I said, number one is a transformation my dad made. That's the first time I seen God, because I knew who he was before, and I seen who he was when he left this world. Wasn't the same man. I always say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. That was my dad. My dad he finished the race. And, you don't have those internal feelings of a parent until you have a kid. And to me, that helped me understand more of God when I had kids, because now I feel what it's like when they have something that's the end of the world to them. they didn't get the dinosaur they wanted. It's the end of the world, but it's going to be okay. When I was going to God saying, if this didn't happen for me, it's the end of the world. No, it's not. No, it's not. Started having a lot more of an understanding of God by being a dad. Those little things you think that are so big and they're really not. And so it's been amazing feeling and seeing those things as I've grown up to where I always say the Bible and horsemanship are a lot alike. They're a book that never ends.
Absolutely. It was life-changing when I had my son, because it was just literally that moment where you're like, oh, it's not about me. Yep. That's it. It ceases to be about me now. Of course, you got to take care of yourself. I'm not saying that, but everything I do now, they are watching. I am completely accountable. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to have to apologize for mistakes. I have to tell them, hey, what
we are
I did.
The example.
Exactly. 100%. All right. Well, then going back to what's coming up then, talk to everyone listening about the upcoming event, how they can support it, how they can attend, or anything else you want to talk about.
So I have, when I talked about the military event that in 2020 that just kind of blew up, was we named it the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation. And so within this 5 years, we have added almost $100,000 to the roping events for the military. And so that's through sponsorships. We have donations that also come throughout the year. No one's on salary. I'm not on salary. My board's not on salary. All my military ambassadors and first responders, no one's on a salary. This is all our give back. The only thing that gets pulled out is we have people that go and find sponsorships, and there's commission out of that. And so that way, like, no one knows that this, because I've heard a lot of the guys talk about how leery they are of these nonprofits because of how they've turned so counterfeit, I guess is maybe a good word.
Profitable.
Too self-serving in a nonprofit, right? So we're very leery about that. And like I said, we have plenty of military on our board that are making sure that this thing is that way. And so Liberty and Loyalty Foundation, look it up. With anyone that serves, we'd love to have you, even if you don't rope. There's so many guys that come from back east that just come out and hang out and watch these guys come rope. You get to watch the best guys in the world rope, and you get to watch these guys rope with the best guys in the world and rope with each other. There's 67,500 added just in the military first responder roping. They get to rope for $30,000 in prize money for first, and the rest of that money goes from second to 15th. I have tried to make this thing now to where when they told me this was the best day of their life, I'm like, all right, let me show you the cool stuff I got to do while you guys are fighting for my freedom. So what I call this the NFR Showdown is what we have on Sunday afternoon in Cowtown Coliseum in Fort Worth. We go from NRS in Decatur, Texas, and have our jackpots from Friday and Saturday to Sunday at Cowtown Coliseum live on the Cowboy channel, which is our ESPN of our industry. And so the military first responder roping, we take the top 15 just like we do in the NFR. That Saturday after the roping is where we have our gala. This is where we raise our money. So we have auction items from Kentucky Derby tickets to we're getting to race some NASCAR to some hunts to all kind of stuff. This is where we raise our money with our gala. Well, we have a back number ceremony, which is exactly what happens at the NFR when we make the NFR. So that's where the top 15 guys that qualified, we get their back numbers, they get pictures, have a big celebration for it, and then we kick off our gala. And Greg Coker is going to be our guest speaker this year. So it's going to be exciting to have him. Sunday, this is where the NFR guys show up, all the top 50 in the world. Also, last year, we're trying to get him again this year, but last year, Kojo showed up and came and roped with the NFR guys, Cody Johnson, the country singer. And that's where the top 15 military first responders run their short round steer. So basically, the Cowtown Coliseum is the exact same dimensions as the NFR in Vegas. So what I try to do is create an NFR experience for these guys. They can watch the NFR guys go, and then they get to rope in that same setting. So at the NFR, we also, during our grand entry, when we start our national anthem and we introduce everything, at the NFR, we all ride behind our state flags. Well, during my event, all the military guys that made the top 15 and their first responders, they all ride behind their branch flags. So they get that same NFR experience as what it's like in Vegas, but their short round steer is in the same field, same setup. Our goal this year is, even if you can't donate, man, if you're in the vicinity, just come watch. come look at Liberty and Loyalty Foundation. Check out, get tickets at Cowtown Coliseum. This is the one thing I haven't got to do yet. So I'll come back to that here in just a second. But when they rope, all 15 guys are paid, just like the NFR. We get paid to make the NFR. So all these guys get paid. We pay down to 15 holes. But when these guys win it, they take the victory lap just like they do at the NFR. We got saddles sitting there, buckles, a check for $30,000. Katie Lucas from the Cowboy channels interview them. They're live on the TV, and just getting that experience, what it feels like to win the NFR. But the one thing that I would love to be able to do is I would love to pack that Cowtown Coliseum, because when you ring the bell at a rodeo and that crowd erupts is the coolest feeling in the world. So what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to promote this event so much to get people to show up to this event and get behind these guys, these men and women in this event, and let them hear that roar. Let them hear that, because I'm telling you, it's the coolest thing as far as competing, I think, as a guy can feel. So that's kind of what my goal is behind this. So
for people listening, where can they find the event online? Where can they donate? And any other places on social media?
Yeah, libertyandloyalty.com. That's got all the information on there between auction items. A lot of our silent auction items are online. You can bid on them there. Come to our gala if you can on Saturday night. That's where our live auction items are. And then come to the event in Cowtown Coliseum. It's got the dates on there, November 7th through the 8th in Decatur, Texas, and then November 9th on Sunday at Cowtown Coliseum. So
beautiful. Well, I want to throw some quick closing questions at you before I let you go. Okay. The first one that I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
That's a good one. I think money-wise, I would say the one that shifted my thinking on success on money was, I thought, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I thought that was a really good book that explained kind of the difference between making money and making money work for you. I thought those were really good. The Bible, obviously, but there's so many different things that you can read. Men's books that one of the things in my Bible study group that we have right now is the Dialed In Man. It's a really good 40-day devotional book. I really like it. And so those are things that I love. There's a lot of competition books that I've read, that helps with competition. But, all the books now that I'm reading and podcast is something to do with understanding more about the Bible, because I can't tell you how many times I've read scripture and then somebody explained it this way. It's like, oh, that's what that meant. And so the devotionals is, I love that Real Talk with Mark Driscoll, or Real Men with Mark Driscoll, and he's got so many good books out there, and, finding your purpose and becoming the men that God's called and created us to be. Those are the things that I'm right now. Is another one, the Men's Playbook that we're reading by John Ramos. Has been a really good devotional as well. Looking for people, looking for opportunity to add value in this world. Where that when you're walking through Jesus and people can see it through that example, that you might be the only Jesus someone ever sees. And so when you're going in public, or when I'm going in public, what opportunities do I see that? How can I maybe it's buying that person lunch that's eating in there by themselves. Maybe it's saying hello in such a nice way, or maybe it's the waiter that, is, I'm going to pray for my meal. Is there anything I can pray for you on? Just little things that a guy can do that when they leave there, feel like they were seen, felt like they were, in a world where everyone's looking down at their phone. Just so many different ways out there. So I like the Dialed In Man and the Men's Playbook that we've been reading here lately, that's really made putting down my phone in public and maybe being the only Jesus anyone ever sees, to try to become that man. So I really like those books.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. Going to a building on a Sunday or sticking a fish on the back of your car doesn't make you a good person. It's being Christ-like, not worshiping blindly.
Yeah, I love the thought of, how do I make my day through a biblical lens? How do I handle any situation that I have there's a scripture that would fit that situation, that I can, every day is a challenge. You think about purpose, man, there's if you're looking for it, there's plenty of ways that every day can be a challenge to strive to get better. But man, to be a husband and to be a father, that's number one for sure. And then now, how do I set example for my kids when I'm in public that is going to strive them to try to become the same way? So those are things when we talk about it being accountable and being the example, that's where I can really see where God's worked on me with having my kids. And now how do I become that man?
Absolutely. Well, we talked about books. What about films, documentaries that you love?
Yeah, Band of Brothers, man, that was such a good one. I loved We Were Soldiers. I thought Mel Gibson was such a great leader. What was the one? Was it Fury with Brad Pitt?
The tank one, yeah.
Yes, he was a great leader. I love them. Where the like you see natural leadership. Oh, I love that. Those were great ones. And then the Band of Brothers, man, was good because it helped me a lot with history. Same with the Pacific. I love those. And obviously Top Gun, man. I mean, shit, who doesn't love Top Gun 1 and 2? And but yeah, those were great. And like for me, rodeoing, it's 8 seconds. That's a great one, man. If you're new to the industry, great. 8 seconds is a great one. I loved a lot of football movies, things like that. But as far as leadership, I loved watching those movies. And then, yeah, the 8 seconds was good. Westerns, a really good Western. Obviously, Lonesome Dove is the greatest Western probably ever. Anything John Wayne, from Rio Bravo to the Cowboys. But one that's not out there that's really, really good, because I'm a Tommy Lee Jones fan, is The Good Old Boys. Man, that's a good classic. But one of the best competition ones that I liked the most was 7 Days in Utopia. And that one's not on a lot of people's radar. That was a great movie. It's a golf movie. It's about competition, but it was a really good Christian-based movie that really keeps things in perspective on how to compete. But also it's got Robert Duvall in it, so you can't go wrong there. But it's probably one of the best life movies as far as competing and keeping things grounded. I really love that movie.
I just saw a clip today on social media, and I don't follow golf, so I don't know exactly who it was, but it was an American golfer saying he'll never play in the States again just because of the disrespect that was happening to the golfers while they were trying to play in this most recent championship. So, it's interesting, what was perceived as such a, I guess you'd use the word gentlemanly game, how even this nastiness has even perforated the golf course now.
Did it sound like Happy Gilmore?
Yeah, exactly. But at least that was all tongue in cheek. So, this is real life.
I just seen it a little bit on X, but yeah, it didn't sound good. But it almost sounded like the Happy Gilmore crowd infiltrated the golf. It sounded like.
Yeah, exactly. But, all right. Yeah. Well, the next question.
Another good one. I think and I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
Another good one that I really liked on becoming a great man, I thought, was Courageous and The Forge. Those were two good ones that helped me become a better dad, strive to become a better dad, and also become. The Forge was a really good one with helping that helped me start my Bible study group, and then also trying to do more in my community. Those were good, inspiring movies that I thought too.
Brilliant. Well, the next question, is there a person you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Todd Hornbuckle. Call sign Horny. He's a badass, man. I love that dude. Great story, great man, inspiring. Love that guy, man. Love his story.
Fantastic. All right. Well, the very last question before we make sure we underline where everyone can find all the things we talked about today. What do you do to decompress?
My kids is pretty good, but sometimes that doesn't always work because it can get a little stressful. Every once in a while, man, I loved it when Top Gun came out. I went to the movies and just kind of got away from everything, went by myself. I love the movies. I love popcorn. We have a tiny little pool here. Every once in a while I was getting in that thing. The Texas heat's pretty hot. Sometimes driving by myself, a good podcast, a good movie. Sometimes that is just enough, especially in inspirational movies. Like I say, Courageous and The Forge and 7 Days in Utopia, those were inspirational movies where you can just take that time and kind of decompress, but then also it's that recharge of when you do come back where you feel like your purpose is back again. Those are good ways for me. And then sometimes too, when I just need my ass kicked, I take jujitsu once a week. And sometimes just getting your ass kicked every once in a while is a little good for you. You know, it's I enjoy the constant learning. I enjoy the developing the new craft, and sometimes that is recharging in itself. So those are kind of some things that I do.
I did jiu-jitsu today before we sat down, and yeah, humbling once again. I said that I've got these amazing calluses on my hands from tapping all the time.
yeah, exactly. I swear the guy that I train with has 3 hands. I don't know where they come from.
It's amazing. All right. Well, Charly, I want to thank you so much. Again, thank you to Greg for making this this connection. But I mean, you know, not only just telling your story and what you're doing now for, you know, these incredible professions, but also for displaying this courageous vulnerability that we were talking about. I mean, you come from a very arguably manly professional sport, but then we spent a lot of time talking about the other side too. And I think it's so important. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
I appreciate the opportunity, James. And, you know, I give the glory to God. That's who has put this opportunity that I've been able to do. I just thank him each and every day for giving me the ability to do what I was called and created to do, I feel like. So I appreciate this platform, James, to be able to get on your show. So I appreciate you.